We've talked before about how investors get paid when passively investing in a real estate syndication, but what about the people who run the deal? The sponsors. What's in it for them, and how do they earn an income from these opportunities? Whether you want to be a sponsor yourself, or you're simply interested in understanding what sponsors are actually being paid for when you invest, this is the video for you. I'm Matt Picheny, your backstage guide to passive investing. As a real estate syndication coach and a sponsor of over 4,000 apartment units, I've got a good understanding of how sponsors earn their fees. I share a lot about this and many other real estate topics on my YouTube channel, social media accounts, and my best-selling book, Backstage Guide to Real Estate. Without a doubt, sponsors are integral to the success or failure of any syndication. They are the CEO, negotiate deals, place at-risk capital into the venture, manage the day-to-day mechanics of each deal, and much more. And they need to get paid for that effort. By understanding the incentives for the sponsors you deal with, you'll be able to determine if you feel your interests are aligned with the team running the deal. For a more in-depth look at this, you can check out my book. Now, let's look at the different types of fees and income for sponsors. The great thing about passive investing is that as an investor, you don't need to do anything once you've invested in the deal. The flip side is that the deal sponsors have to do the work to make the deal a success, and they need to be compensated for that effort. It's a heavy load, and we've looked at that before in my video about what is a syndication. What we haven't looked at in detail are the specific fees that the sponsor receives in return for these efforts. It's important to understand these as they are a key component of the deal. While a sponsor can charge a fee for anything you both agree on, there are essentially three types of sponsor fees we typically see in real estate syndication charged at different stages in the life cycle of a deal. Acquisition fees. This is what the sponsorship group receives when the deal closes. Acquisition fees are usually a percentage of the purchase price and generally range between 1% to 3%. As an investor, you'll want to check that your sponsors have a good track record before handing over your hard-earned cash to invest in their deal, and scrutinize this even further to see if they can justify charging their acquisition fee. Remember, this fee gets paid immediately at closing before the deal has made any sort of return. I've seen brand new sponsors with zero experience who want to charge large acquisition fees straight out of the gate. If you've never made a dime for an investor, can you really justify charging an acquisition fee? Sponsors spend a lot of time and money developing relationships with brokers and property managers, learning the market, and underwriting deals. For those that are established and have a track record of providing returns to their investors, I think an acquisition fee is justified. But if you're new on the scene, it's a hard sell. FYI, I didn't take any acquisition fee on the first 2 large syndication deals that I sponsored. A low acquisition fee doesn't guarantee that you're getting into a good investment deal. But if that group has a good reputation, then a low acquisition fee could mean more money in your pocket at the end of the day. Asset management fees. This compensates the sponsorship team for overseeing the operations of the property and is usually between 1% to 3% of the revenue collected each month. Though a property management company often handles the day-to-day operations, rent collection, maintenance, leasing, someone on the sponsor team should oversee all of this. On all the deals where I am the asset manager, I have, at minimum, weekly calls with the property management company, and we review the finances on a monthly basis, and I share all of that information with the investors. It's a lot of activity. Disposition or capital event fees. This is charged either on the sale or on the refinance of a property and is generally between 1% to 3% of the sales price. Disposition capital event fees are not as common as acquisition fees. As an investor, you might think that it's much better to pay a lower fee, say 1% versus a 3% acquisition fee. Sure, on the face of it, that makes sense, but what if the 1% fee is for a sponsor group with little or no track record of successful deals versus the 3% for a sponsor group that's highly experienced at operating solid deals? I know where my money's going in that scenario. The point here is that we can't judge deals on fees alone. Low sponsors fees are not a guarantee of a greater profitability, but neither are higher sponsor fees a guarantee of success of the deal. The lion's share of the sponsor's compensation is attached to the deal's performance. The sponsor receives a portion of the equity ownership in the property in return for all their hard work. This equity is referred to as their carried interest in the deal, also called sweat equity. As the deal is in operation, excess cash flow is distributed to all owners of equity in the deal. Despite that, the sponsors really make their profits at the end of a deal. It all depends on how the deal is set up, but in the vast majority of cases, the process is investors are made whole by receiving 100% of their original investment back. Now, we went over this in my video about how passive investors make their returns when we looked at the return on capital versus the return of capital. Now, of all the remaining money after that, it's split based on each person's equity in the deal. This typically means 20 to 30% of the profits goes to the sponsors. Instead of a straight split between investors and sponsors, some deals are set up with more complex structures. In a waterfall, certain classes of investors can receive more or all of their capital back before other investors. Hurdles can allow for the equity structure to change based on certain metrics. This means that if a deal performs better than expected, the sponsors could get a larger percentage of profits if certain results are achieved. For example, if an IRR goes above, say, 16%, anything above that is split in a different way that is more favorable to the sponsor. Now, some people would argue that this is not fair for investors. They've taken a risk, so why shouldn't they cash in on that bonus performance? Why should sponsors take more of their lunch? I can understand that point of view, but this arrangement is no different from a sales rep smashing their monthly targets and getting a much higher payout on those bonus sales that no one else was able to make. So long as the agreement was clear up front, I don't think this should be a problem. And that's the key point. All of this should be clearly disclosed in the private placement memorandum, PPM, and company agreement up front. You should be aware of what sponsors are charging so that you're not caught by surprise with hidden fees. There are no surprises for careful readers. I have a coaching program where I help people become successful sponsors in real estate syndications. You can join me backstage at Picheny.com to learn more.